Hey, wide awake family. If you see this, it's your sign to smash that like button. Yes, you listening right now. That way YouTube shows you more amazing stories like this one. We love you all. Now enjoy the stories. I matched with her on Hinge on a random Thursday night. Her name was Mia. She had that type of profile that made you feel like she actually had something going on. Not the fake kind of I'm busy energy people post to sound important. She was a paramedic, or so she said. Every photo was her in some uniform, tired but still smiling, with captions like another long shift or saving lives one coffee at a time. I don't know what it was about that. Maybe it was the idea that she helped people for a living. It made her seem real, like she wasn't playing games. We talked for about a week before meeting. She kept saying her schedule was insane. Every time I tried to plan something, she'd reply late, apologizing with messages like, sorry, I had a 14-hour shift, or crazy night, ambulance calls nonstop. I didn't think much of it. Everyone's busy. But then she sent a voice note one night while she was apparently on shift, saying she could pick me up and show me what her nights were like. She said it would be different from any day I've ever had. I thought that was cool. A bit weird, but unique. She showed up outside my flat around 11:30 p.m. I walked out expecting a car or Uber, but what pulled up was a full-on ambulance. Lights off, engine humming. She was in the driver's seat wearing a green paramedic uniform, hair tied back, a coffee in the cup holder. She smiled and said, "Hop in." The back doors had that dull white shine from the streetlight, and for a second I wondered if I was actually allowed in there. She just told me to come through the side door because she had stuff in the back. Inside, it looked exactly how you'd imagine. Metal cabinets, medical kits, the stretcher folded up against the wall. The air smelled like antiseptic and coffee. She laughed at how tense I looked and said she just needed to drop something off before heading to her next call. I assumed she meant medical equipment. We drove through quiet London streets. It was late enough that the roads were empty except for buses and delivery vans. She kept her eyes on the road, occasionally glancing at her phone, checking some app. I remember asking if her work let her take the ambulance out for errands. She said, "Benefit of night shift, no one checks." I laughed awkwardly, not knowing if she was serious. At first, everything felt kind of thrilling. It was weird being in a moving ambulance, seeing the city from that perspective. But after about 20 minutes, I started noticing little things that didn't make sense. The dashboard was messy, full of coffee cups and energy drink cans. There were random bags stacked behind the seats, not medical gear, more like shopping bags and boxes taped shut. One even had a label from an electronics store. She parked in this small industrial lot, half lit by flickering lights. She left the engine running and got out, saying she'd just be 2 minutes. I waited, watching her disappear behind a gate. A few minutes later, she came back carrying what looked like a black toolbox, tossed in the back, and said we could go. I didn't ask questions. I just told myself it must have been some emergency supply drop or something. We started driving again, taking random turns. I noticed we weren't heading anywhere familiar. My phone battery was low, so I didn't open maps, but I could tell we were near some old warehouses. She seemed distracted, glancing in the mirrors a lot, like she was making sure no one was following. Her calm vibe was gone. Then out of nowhere, blue flashing lights filled the rearview mirror. She cursed under her breath and told me not to say anything. I froze. My first thought was that she'd run a red light or something. But when she pulled over, 3 police cars boxed us in immediately. Doors slammed. Flashlights beamed through the windows. One officer shouted for her to step out. She hesitated, then opened the door slowly. They told her to keep her hands visible. I sat there like an idiot, completely confused. Another officer came to my side and opened my door, asking who I was. I told him I was just on a date. The look he gave me said everything, like he didn't believe a word of it. They cuffed her on the spot. One of them went around the back of the ambulance, opened the doors, and just whistled quietly. I couldn't see much, but I heard one of them mutter something about stolen property. It turned out the ambulance wasn't hers. Not even close. She'd stolen it a week before from a depot in Essex and had been driving around pretending to be a paramedic. She'd been using it to transport stolen goods between different buyers because, apparently, no one suspects an ambulance in traffic. The uniform was fake. The photos on her profile were from Google. They kept me for questioning until 4 a.m. at the station. I had to explain how we met, how long we'd been talking, every message I'd read. I even showed them the chat history to prove I didn't know anything. One of the officers said I was lucky she didn't use me to help load stuff, or worse. When they finally let me go, I sat on the curb outside the station for a while just trying to process it. The weirdest part was how normal she seemed online. The little things I ignored made sense after. How she always said she was on shift, but never showed pictures with coworkers. How she avoided video calls. How she texted from different numbers. Later that morning, I checked Hinge. Her profile was gone, just completely vanished, like she'd never been there. A week later, I got a call from a detective saying she'd been linked to a bigger group involved in moving stolen tech around the city. I wasn't in trouble, but they needed to confirm what I saw that night. Apparently, the ambulance was filled with laptops and phones worth thousands of dollars. I keep thinking about how calm she looked when I first met her, like it was just another normal night at work. No panic, no guilt. Just a fake paramedic cruising around with a stranger beside her, acting like it was a casual date. I deleted Hinge after that. I know everyone says that when they have a bad story, but I mean it. There's something weird about how real people can fake being good so easily online. Anyway, that's how I ended up spending my first and last date inside a stolen ambulance surrounded by flashing blue lights. I matched with him on Bumble late one night after work. His name was Marcus. He looked normal, clean haircut, white shirt, big grin, standing outside some fancy restaurant in one of his photos. He said he worked in finance, which wasn't surprising. Every guy on Bumble either worked in finance or said he did. He had a smooth way of messaging two short replies that made him seem confident, like he didn't need to try too hard. It wasn't flirty or weird. He just seemed easy to talk to. He asked me out after 2 days of texting. I didn't think much of it. We agreed on dinner at a place called Loom, one of those expensive restaurants I'd only ever seen on TikTok where everything looks smaller than it should but somehow costs double what you expect. I wasn't planning to go all out, but he suggested it and said he'd been meaning to try it anyway. I figured that meant he was paying. The night of the date, he showed up right on time. I got there a little early and was sitting outside scrolling on my phone when he pulled up in a dark BMW. He waved through the window before parking. First impression, he looked even better in person, but there was something a little too polished about him. His clothes, his cologne, his watch, it all screamed someone who wanted to be noticed. He opened the door for me, smiled, and told the hostess we had a reservation under his name. They led us to a corner table near the window. The place was dimly lit, soft music, people talking quietly over their plates. It wasn't my usual type of place. I felt a bit out of place, but he seemed comfortable like he'd been there plenty of times. From the start, he took control of the menu. He kept pointing out the most expensive things, saying we should try something special. He ordered a bottle of wine without asking what I wanted, just told the waiter the name and price like it was nothing. I tried to act cool, but in my head, I was already doing the math of how much this meal was going to cost if we split it. He talked a lot about his job, his gym routine, his car, his crazy clients. The kind of stuff people say to make themselves sound busy and successful. He asked me questions here and there, but it was clear he liked the sound of his own voice more than my answers. Still, I let him talk. The food came out looking like something from a magazine. He ordered steak, I got pasta, and he kept pouring wine into my glass even when I said I was fine. About halfway through, he excused himself to go to the bathroom. I didn't think anything of it. He took his phone, said he'd be right back, and walked off toward the hallway near the bar. I kept scrolling through my phone while finishing my food, assuming he'd just be a minute. 10 minutes passed, then 15. The waiter came by asking if he wanted dessert, and I said he was still in the bathroom. When 20 minutes hit, I started to feel weird. I texted him, but the message didn't deliver. I waited a few more minutes before asking one of the staff if they could check. The waiter went to look, came back, and said the bathroom was empty. I looked around the restaurant thinking maybe he went to make a call outside, but there was no sign of him. His jacket was gone. The waiter came back again, this time with the manager. She looked at me, then at the table, and quietly asked if I was aware that the bill hadn't been paid. I explained that he'd gone to the bathroom and hadn't returned. The manager just sighed like she'd seen this before. She asked for his name again, and when I said Marcus, her expression changed slightly. She walked off and came back a few minutes later with another staff member. They told me they were calling the police. I sat there frozen, confused and embarrassed while people at nearby tables started glancing over. The waiter took the plates away quietly while I tried to explain that I didn't even know the guy like that. It wasn't until two officers showed up about 15 minutes later that I realized this wasn't just some mix-up. The officers asked for his name and what app we met on. I showed them his profile, and one of them nodded like he already knew it. They said they'd had multiple reports over the past few weeks about a man using dating apps to pull the same stunt. Meeting women at expensive restaurants, ordering the most expensive items, pretending to go to the bathroom, then disappearing right before the bill. He apparently hit more than 10 restaurants around the city, always changing his name and photos slightly but keeping the same pattern. They took my statement while the restaurant staff stood nearby. One of the officers said the guy had been caught on security cameras before, but always managed to get away before police arrived. He'd use prepaid phones and deactivate his dating profiles within hours of each date. They called him the Dine and Dash Guy, some joke nickname they probably used in the station. The total that night was $238. I didn't have that kind of money just sitting around. The restaurant said they'd report it as part of the investigation, so I wouldn't have to pay, but the whole thing left me humiliated. I sat there another 10 minutes after they left, staring at my half-finished wine, wondering how someone could make a hobby out of using people like that. When I got home, I read our chat again. The conversations felt so normal. He talked about his family, his travels, even joked about how bad he was with directions. There wasn't a single red flag in the messages. I tried searching his name online, but nothing came up. Just random profiles that weren't him. 2 days later, a detective called me to confirm my statement. He said they believed Marcus wasn't even his real name. He'd been using fake IDs, sometimes showing up with different hairstyles or clothes to avoid being recognized. They had footage of him leaving Loon that night, walking calmly to a car parked down the street, smiling as he adjusted his shirt like nothing happened. I didn't tell anyone about it for a while. It was embarrassing enough to admit I'd even gone on the date. But the more I thought about it, the more disturbing it felt that he wasn't after money from me. He was after the rush. Like he got off on walking out of expensive restaurants, leaving someone else to deal with the fallout. I deleted Bumble that night. I couldn't even look at the app icon without feeling sick. The weird part is that sometimes I still see people who look like him in public, same haircut, same smirk, and for a second I wonder if it's him. That was months ago, but I still think about it every time I walk past a restaurant like that. I can't even sit through a dinner date without checking where the exits are now. I met her on Hinge on a quiet Sunday night. Her name was Rachel. She said she worked in marketing at a tech company in the city. Her photos were clean, like LinkedIn-level professional, but still casual enough to seem normal. There was one of her at a rooftop party, another at her desk with two monitors behind her, and one selfie in an elevator with that kind of lighting that makes everything look more expensive than it is. She had that calm energy in her messages too, funny, confident, not pushy. She mentioned loving late-night walks through empty office buildings when she worked late, how the quiet helped her think. I thought it was weird, but it also sounded kind of cool. We talked for a week before meeting. It wasn't one of those awkward chats either. She texted fast, joked a lot, sent random memes. She kept saying her job was stressful, but that she had her ways to unwind. When I asked what she meant, she said she liked going to her office late sometimes to chill because no one's around. I thought that meant she was dedicated, like career-focused. We met at a coffee place after work. She showed up wearing office clothes, a gray blazer, heels, neat hair tied back. She actually looked older in person, but still good. She had that confident posture that makes you think they know exactly what they're doing. We talked for an hour, mostly about random stuff like music or commute, how she hated her manager. Then she brought up the idea of going somewhere quieter. She said her flatmates were annoying, always throwing parties, and she didn't feel like sitting in a bar. I said we could just walk around for a bit. That's when she smiled and said she could get us privacy at her office. At first, I thought she was joking. Who says that on a first date? But she explained it like it was totally normal. She said she'd get access after hours and sometimes use the break room to relax or grab snacks. It didn't sound too crazy. I figured maybe her company let employees come in whenever, like those modern startup places. We got in her car and drove toward the business district. It was already dark, and the roads were empty except for taxis. She played some quiet music, tapping her fingers on the wheel, humming along. I tried not to overthink it, but part of me wondered if this was even allowed. She seemed relaxed though, like she'd done it before. When we got there, the office building looked like one of those glass towers that glow faintly from inside. Most of the floors were dark except for the lobby lights. She parked at the side where there was a gate and walked up to a small keypad next to a door. I watched her pull out a card from her purse, swipe it, then type something in. The light turned green, and the door clicked open. Inside, the air was cold and smelled faintly of cleaning products. The lights were off except for the glow of emergency exit signs. She said we could go up to the 5th floor, where her office was. We took the elevator, and the only sound was the humming from the fluorescent lights. She kept smiling at me, like she was proud of how cool this was. I didn't say much. I just followed her, trying to act casual. When the doors opened, it was pitch dark. She used her phone's flashlight to lead the way down a hallway. There were rows of cubicles, computer screens, plants on desks, everything perfectly clean. It looked too neat to be fake, so I had no reason to think anything was off. She said her section was at the end of the hall, and she started typing the code into another keypad on a door that led into a glass meeting room. As soon as she opened it, alarms exploded through the building. Loud, mechanical, high-pitched sounds that echoed in every direction. I froze instantly, covering my ears, my heart pounding like crazy. She just stared at the flashing red lights with her mouth open, completely blank. Then she turned to me and whispered that it wasn't supposed to happen, that it usually doesn't trigger, usually. That's when I realized she'd done this before. I panicked and asked what we should do, but she just ran back toward the elevator. The doors wouldn't close because some kind of security lock had activated. I could see the lights flashing through every floor's glass panels. A voice came on the speaker saying the police had been called. I remember feeling that cold rush of realizing this wasn't just a mistake. It was a full-on break-in alert. We ran for the stairs. She was ahead of me, her heels clacking on the metal steps, muttering under her breath. By the time we reached the bottom, 2 security guards were already there, shouting for us to stop. I put my hands up immediately, trying to explain, but she bolted for the side door. They caught her before she even got 5 steps out. One of the guards grabbed me too, demanding ID. Within minutes, 2 police cars pulled up outside, lights flashing. They separated us and started asking questions. I kept saying I didn't know anything, that I thought she worked there. They didn't believe me at first. One of the officers went through her purse and found a fake employee ID. She printed her face over someone else's badge. Turns out she didn't work there at all. She'd been using different offices for months, pretending she was an employee to impress people she met online. Sometimes she'd use old entry cards from friends who actually worked in those buildings, guessing door codes or prying open side gates. She'd even been caught on CCTV before sneaking into lobbies late at night. They said she had some kind of obsession with pretending to belong to high-end places, like she wanted people to believe she had a better job or lifestyle. I was questioned for almost 2 hours. They checked my phone and messages, even asked if I'd ever been in contact with her before that week under a different name. I told them no. Eventually they let me go, saying they believed me, but that I might be called in later to testify if it went to court. The next morning, I searched her name online and nothing came up. Her dating profile was gone. Every trace of her had disappeared like she'd never existed. I kept thinking about how normal she'd seemed. The uniform, the access card, the calmness, all fake. A few days later, a detective called to tell me she'd been charged with breaking and entering, trespassing, and using false identification. Apparently, I wasn't the first guy she'd taken to an office. A couple of others had gotten away before alarms went off. Now, every time I walk past a glass building at night, I think of that alarm. The way it echoed through the floors, how the red lights flickered across her face when she realized it was over. It still feels unreal that I almost got arrested over a date. That's how I ended up spending the night in a police station for a job she never even had. It started like one of those boring nights where you're scrolling through dating apps just to kill time. I wasn't even planning to meet anyone. His name was Tyler. His profile said he worked in it, loved road trips, and had a weird obsession with energy drinks. He had short, dark hair, wore a cap in most of his photos, and had that clean, quiet look, like the type of guy who always smelled like laundry detergent and didn't say much. His messages were short, but he was funny in a dry way. He said he didn't like clubs or loud restaurants, that he preferred low-key spots where you could actually talk. That didn't sound suspicious at all. Honestly, I liked it. He said he wanted to meet that same night since he was already out getting snacks for a long drive. I hesitated for a second, but said fine. He told me to meet him at a gas station near my area because it was easy to find and open late. It wasn't that far. I thought it was weird to meet at a gas station, but it was in a busy area with lights everywhere. He said we could just grab a drink and talk in his car for a bit. Sounded chill enough. I got there around 10:30 p.m. The place was bright, almost too bright, with those buzzing white lights that make everything look kind of washed out. The air smelled like gasoline and coffee. There were a few cars parked near the store, people filling up tanks, some guy in a hoodie walking in and out with snacks. I parked a few spaces away from the door and texted him that I was there. A few seconds later, a black sedan pulled up next to me. Tyler waved for the driver's seat. He looked exactly like his photos, maybe even better. He had that casual look, plain hoodie, baseball cap, clean car, nothing strange. He smiled and said he'd grab some snacks and be right back. I told him I'd wait. I watched him go inside, grab a few things, and pay at the counter. Nothing weird. When he came back, he handed me a soda and some crisps and said he liked to sit in a lot to talk because you learn more about people when it's quiet. I remember thinking he seemed calm, almost too calm, but I brushed it off. We started talking about random stuff. Music where we grew up work. He said he worked night shifts sometimes, managing security systems for local businesses. I thought that meant alarms or cameras, but I didn't ask much. He had that quiet way of talking that made you lean in a bit, like he was always saying something you shouldn't miss. A few minutes in, he looked toward the gas station and smiled weirdly. Not at me, not at anything in particular, just at the building. I remember asking what was funny, and he said something about how people don't realize how much you can see from outside. I laughed awkwardly, thinking he meant reflections or whatever, but his eyes stayed fixed on the store windows. Then I noticed it. His phone on the dash had a small screen playing what looked like a live camera feed. The gas station, from a different angle. It wasn't the security feed you see behind the counter either. It was from above, like a CCTV view. I thought it was maybe some public live cam, but then I saw the timestamp. Current date, current time. Before I could even say anything, a pair of police cars pulled into the lot, lights flashing, blocking both exits. Tyler's head dropped, and he muttered something under his breath. I froze. He told me not to panic, that it was just a misunderstanding. But his voice cracked a little, like even he didn't believe what he was saying. Officers got out with flashlights pointed straight at us. One of them shouted for him to step out of the car. He didn't move at first. He just stared at his phone screen and slowly raised his hands. I was shaking, still strapped into my seat, completely confused. They pulled him out, cuffed him against the hood, and started searching the car. One of the cops came to my window and asked if I knew him. I said we just met. He nodded, said I was in trouble, but I have to stay put for a minute. While they searched, one of the officers found a laptop bag in the back seat. They opened it, and I could see wires, adapters, and multiple external hard drives inside. Another one found a small black box under the passenger seat, something with blinking lights and antenna wires. I had no clue what any of it was. After a few minutes, one of the officers came over and quietly said that the guy had been under investigation for months. Apparently, he'd been hacking into gas station security systems across the city using remote access tools to spy on people. He'd watch them at the pumps, at the cash register, sometimes even follow them home if he recognized their cars. They said he was caught once before, but vanished before they could arrest him again. Tonight, they tracked his car near one of the hack stations and followed him until he stopped here. I sat there completely silent while they questioned him. He barely said a word, just kept glancing at me like he was sorry. I didn't even know what to think. He'd been so normal, funny, calm, harmless, but now it made sense. How he always suggested quiet places. How he said he liked watching people without them knowing. I thought it was just some deep thing he said to sound interesting. They eventually asked me to step out, search my bag, and checked my ID. I told them everything I could, that we met online, that he said he worked in it, that this was our first time meeting. They said I was lucky they got there when they did. I guess he wasn't violent, but you never know what someone like that is capable of. After about an hour, they let me leave. I sat in my car for a while, watching them pack up his stuff, the flashing lights bouncing off the gas station glass. It felt unreal. Like I'd just been sitting next to a stranger who'd been spying on people for fun, maybe even on me before we met. When I got home, I deleted every dating app on my phone. The next day, I got a call from a detective asking for a formal statement. They told me he'd been found with dozens of folders of recorded footage, people filling up their cars, talking on the phone, hugging, eating, anything he could capture. He hacked into dozens of security systems using default passwords and sold some of the footage online to random forums. The whole thing messed with my head for weeks. Every time I stopped at a gas station, I looked around for cameras. I started parking far from the pumps, avoiding eye contact with anyone. What still gets me is that when we first matched, his first message was, "I like watching people. You learn a lot from them." I thought he meant it metaphorically. Turns out he really meant it. That was the first and last time I ever met someone from a gas station. I matched with her on Bumble on a Friday night when I was half bored, half scrolling. Her name was Ava. She looked like the kind of girl who always had plans. Every photo of her was full of people, champagne glasses, fancy dresses, and neon lights. Her bio said she loved parties, even ones she wasn't invited to. I thought it was just a funny line. She had this big, open smile and the kind of confidence you don't usually see online. We talked a bit over the weekend. She was quick with her replies, always teasing or joking around. She said she liked spontaneous people, people who didn't overthink. I told her I wasn't that spontaneous, but she said she'd fix that. On Sunday night, she asked if I wanted to do something fun the next day. I said sure, expecting it to be a drink or something simple. Then she said, "How about a wedding?" I laughed, thinking she was joking, but she said she had a friend getting married and that it would be chill, just food, drinks, music. I didn't really know what to say. Going to a wedding on a first date sounded weird, but the way she said it made it sound harmless. She told me to wear something decent and that she'd pick me up. Monday afternoon, she pulled up in this silver car blasting music. She looked incredible. Long dress, big sunglasses, perfume that filled the air the second she stepped out. She handed me a tie and said, "You'll need this." I went along with it. She had this energy that made you feel like everything she said was already decided. The venue was on the edge of town, one of those big hotel reception halls that tries to look like a countryside mansion. There were cars everywhere, people laughing, photographers taking pictures. As soon as we walked in, she waved like she knew people, but I noticed no one waved back. I figured maybe she hadn't seen her friends yet. We went straight to the bar. She ordered drinks like she'd been there all day, telling the bartender she was with the bride's side. She handed me a glass and started introducing herself to random guests, acting like she'd known them forever. The weird part was that no one seemed to question it. Weddings are like that. Everyone assumes you belong if you look confident enough. After a while, we sat down at a table and she started whispering things like, "Watch this," every time someone left their seat. I thought she meant people watching, but then I noticed her slipping small gift envelopes into her clutch. She did it fast, casual, like she'd done it before. At first, I thought I was seeing it wrong. I told myself maybe she was holding them for someone. But then I saw her do it again, this time from another table while pretending to take a photo. That's when my stomach dropped. I realized she wasn't joking about crashing parties. She actually meant it. She had no friends getting married. We were literally at a stranger's wedding. I whispered that we should leave, but she just smiled and said we'd go after the cake. She was completely calm, sipping her drink, laughing in speeches. It was like she'd done this 100 times before. I tried to act normal so no one would notice, but my brain was spinning. I kept thinking about the security cameras, about how obvious it must look. Every time someone stood up, she'd nudge me to block the view while she slipped another envelope into her clutch. I didn't know whether to walk out or pretend I didn't exist. Eventually, the bride and groom started dancing, everyone crowded around with phones out, and that's when she decided to go for the gift table. It was set up near the corner, stacked with cards and small boxes. She walked up casually, crouched like she was adjusting her shoe, and slid half the envelopes into a shopping bag she'd brought. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. She walked back to me like nothing happened, whispering that we should leave before traffic got bad. We started heading toward the doors, and that's when I noticed two men near the exit watching us. Not like guests, more like security or something else. One of them spoke into a radio. I felt her hand tighten around my arm, and she started walking faster. Before we even got outside, a group of officers in plain clothes stepped forward, flashing badges. They told us to stop and asked her name. She tried to laugh it off, saying there must be some mistake, but they already had the bag in their hands. One officer opened it, and the sight of all those envelopes, dozens of them, made my stomach flip. They cuffed her on the spot. I just stood there frozen, completely humiliated in front of a room full of people who thought we were guests 5 minutes ago. Someone started shouting that they knew something was off about her. The bride was crying. The groom looked furious. Cameras were flashing again, but not for the same reason as before. The officers pulled me aside, asked if I was with her. I told them I just met her online and thought it was her friend's wedding. One of them sighed and said she'd been on their radar for a while. Apparently, she'd been showing up at weddings around the city for months, sometimes pretending to be a plus one, sometimes acting like a friend of the couple. She'd blend in, steal gift envelopes and cash, and vanish before anyone noticed. They said she was part of a small group that did it regularly, hitting multiple venues every month. They asked me to give a statement, show my messages with her, prove I didn't know. I sat in the back room for almost an hour while they went through her phone. She had photos of wedding halls, calendars with dates and locations, and saved messages where she bragged about how easy it was. She wasn't even using her real name. When they finally let me go, I walked out to my car feeling like I'd just been dragged through someone else's nightmare. Guests were still standing outside talking, some pointing at me as I left. I didn't even want to look back. The next day, the story was already online. Wedding crasher caught at reception sting. They'd been investigating her after multiple reports of missing gifts. That night, undercover officers had been stationed at the venue expecting her to show up. She just happened to bring me along for the ride. I kept thinking about how casual she'd been the whole time. The way she laughed, how she talked about her friend, how she moved like she owned the place. None of it was real. That wasn't even her date. I was just part of the disguise. I deleted Bumble that night and blocked her number even though she was already in jail. That was the first time I ever got invited to a wedding, and the last. He wasn't even my type. That's what makes it worse. His name was Drew, and he had that quiet, mysterious vibe everyone falls for at least once. His profile didn't say much, just that he liked photography, road trips, and staying in unique Airbnbs. His pictures were minimal, one in a hoodie by a lake, another of him sitting in an old car, and one black and white shot of some candles. He didn't look creepy, just kind of normal in that artsy way. We matched on a Thursday. He didn't talk much, but when he did, he seemed chilled. Said he didn't like crowded places, that he preferred calm, private spots. He mentioned he had this crazy unique Airbnb setup where he was staying for the weekend. He said it was an old property with a history, but he fixed it up himself to make it cozy. I thought he meant one of those converted barns or something cool like that. He asked if I wanted to come by for coffee and see it. Normally, I'd say no, but he sounded harmless, and his messages were polite, not pushy. Plus, he sent a photo of the place. It looked normal enough. Dim lighting, some vintage-looking furniture, candles, and an old brick wall. He said he was renting it short-term while helping the owner restore the place. It was on the edge of town, near a street I didn't recognize. I told my friend where I was going just to be safe. She joked that it sounded like a ghost story stab. I laughed, but deep down I felt that small hesitation everyone gets before meeting someone new. Still, I went. The place looked old from the outside, like one of those stone buildings you see in small towns. Big double doors, no clear sign. A hearse was parked on the side, but I thought maybe it was decorative, like one of those weird-themed Airbnbs. He came out to meet me wearing a black hoodie and smiled like he'd been expecting me. Inside, it smelled like something between candles and disinfectant. He led me down a set of stairs, saying that the best part was the basement setup. I didn't question it at first because he said the word Airbnb so casually. The steps creaked as we went down, and the lights got dimmer the lower we went. I started realizing this wasn't what I pictured. The basement was huge, high ceilings, exposed pipes, and walls painted off-white. There were candles along the edge of the room and an old couch in the middle facing a table with a coffee maker on it. It looked like someone had tried to make it cozy but failed. He said the place used to be part of a funeral home. He said it casually, like he was talking about an old warehouse or a diner. I laughed nervously, thinking it was just a weird joke. But then I saw the metal gurney pushed against the wall, covered with a white sheet, and realized he wasn't joking. I asked how this could even be an Airbnb. He said it wasn't listed publicly, that he knew the owner personally. The way he said it made me uncomfortable, but he kept acting calm, talking about how peaceful it was down there. He offered me coffee, but I said I wasn't thirsty. I was too busy noticing all the strange details. The walls had hooks, like ones used for hanging equipment. A faint humming sound came from somewhere behind another door, like a freezer. There was even a wooden sign on the wall that said viewing room. He started showing me around like it was a tour. He pointed out how he turned the prep room into a makeshift studio. There were framed photos on the wall, black and white shots of the same room we were in, but empty. The lighting was the same. The sheets were the same. He said he liked capturing stillness. At that point, I wanted to leave. My hands were shaking, and I kept pretending to check my phone for a message that didn't exist. He didn't try to touch me or anything, but something about how calm he was made it worse. He kept saying things like how people underestimate quiet spaces, how they're the only places left that feel untouched. I told him I had to go soon because I had work early. He nodded but didn't move to show me out. I started walking toward the stairs myself, trying not to run. Then I heard voices from outside, muffled but urgent. Someone was shouting, and a car door slammed. He looked up at the ceiling and muttered something like they're early. I froze near the bottom step, trying to listen. Then there was loud banging on the door upstairs, followed by someone yelling for him to come out. He ran up the stairs, and I stayed where I was, my body completely locked. I could hear heavy footsteps, more shouting, then the sound of the door bursting open. Police came flooding in. One of them yelled for me to stay still. I raised my hands, my heart racing so fast I could barely breathe. They cuffed him right there in the stairwell. He didn't fight it. He just looked calm again, like it was nothing. When one of the officers came over to me, I explained that I didn't know him, that I thought this was an Airbnb. The officer nodded, said neighbors had reported a stolen hearse parked outside. Turns out the place wasn't even listed for rent. It was an old funeral home that had been closed for over a year. He'd been staying there illegally. They found stolen medical equipment, preserved chemicals, and some old documents in a back office. Apparently, he'd been sleeping there for weeks, telling people online he was managing the property. He'd meet women off dating apps, bring them there to show off his unique rental, and then photograph them without permission while pretending to take portraits. They showed me a file they found on his laptop. It had folders labeled with dates. Inside were hundreds of photos of people in that same basement, all taken when they weren't looking. Some looked terrified, some just confused like me. I stayed there for another hour giving my statement, still shaking. They told me I'd been lucky because neighbors had called about the hearse before I'd even arrived. He'd apparently stolen it from a nearby mortuary 2 nights before. The police had been tracking it since morning, waiting to see who showed up. I went home in total silence that night. I didn't even turn on the lights when I got in, just sat there in the dark thinking about how close I was to something I couldn't even understand. He wasn't violent, at least not in the way you think. He just wanted control. He wanted to make people part of his still life thing. He never touched anyone, never said threats, just made them freeze through the atmosphere alone. That was the last time I ever went somewhere without checking the address online first. When I searched later, I found the funeral home's name. It had closed after an electrical fire years ago. The sign was still up, half burned, just like the photos on his wall. I deleted my dating apps that same night. I still get chills whenever I pass old buildings that look abandoned. You never really know who's inside them or who's pretending to be. I matched with her on Tinder on a Wednesday night while I was bored in bed, half watching YouTube and half scrolling through profiles. Her name was Lexi. She had this big smile, pink hair, and that kind of wild, spontaneous vibe that looks fun in pictures, but probably chaotic in real life. Her bio just said, "I go where the night takes me." I didn't expect much, but she replied fast when I messaged her. She was funny too. Her messages were full of emojis, sarcastic jokes, and random stories about how she stayed out too late or ordered food at 3 a.m. She seemed easy to talk to. She said she worked on and off in social media, whatever that meant. After a couple of days of texting, she asked if I wanted to hang out that weekend. She said she'd pick a place because she had a ride set up already. I told her I could drive, but she said it was easier if she just called an Uber for both of us. Said she had a discount code through her job. I didn't think about it twice. Saturday night, she texted me saying she was 5 minutes away. I waited outside my flat, expecting a normal Uber with the sticker and everything. A silver car pulled up, matching the plate she'd sent. She was in the back seat already, waving out the window. The driver looked half asleep, barely nodding when I got in. She was dressed casual, but still stood out: black hoodie, ripped jeans, big rings, and that pink hair tied back. She smelled like perfume and cigarettes. She smiled and handed me a bottle of water from the door compartment. I thanked her and asked where we were going. She said it was a rooftop place downtown, nothing fancy, just chill. The drive was quiet at first. She was on her phone most of the time, scrolling like she was tracking something. The driver didn't talk at all, just followed the GPS. Every so often, she'd glance at her phone, smile, and then lock it again. I figured she was messaging friends. When we got downtown, the car stopped suddenly before turning a corner. That's when everything happened at once. Headlights flashed from behind, sirens blared, and within seconds, 2 police cars boxed us in. The driver freaked out immediately, raising his hands. I froze. Before I could even say anything, officers were shouting for everyone to get out of the car. Lexa looked completely calm. She slid her phone into her hoodie pocket and leaned back like she'd been through this before. They pulled the driver out first. Then one of them opened her door and told her to step out. The second they saw her face, everything changed. One officer said something into his radio and another went straight for her phone. They cuffed her right there on the curb while reading something off a notepad. I was still in the car when one officer came to my window and asked if I knew her. I said we met online. He told me to step out slowly. My hands were shaking. I had no idea what was happening. They asked me to explain how I knew her, who booked the ride, where we were going. After about 10 minutes, one of the officers came over and said she was under arrest for fraud and theft. Apparently, she'd been using stolen Uber accounts to track and rob riders. She'd hack into random profiles, order cars in their names, and either steal their payment info or use the rides to lure people somewhere while she or someone else targeted them later. They said she wasn't working alone. She'd been connected to a string of robberies where she'd meet people from dating apps, offer to book the ride, then either reroute the trip to a quiet area or share their drop-off location with someone waiting nearby. Some of the victims got their wallets stolen. Some just lost money through their Uber accounts. This time, they caught her because one of the stolen profiles she used belonged to someone already working with the police. They tracked her after multiple fake rides were placed in the same area. When she ordered ours, the system flagged it immediately. I stood there on the sidewalk while they searched her bag. They found multiple phones, fake cards, and a small notebook full of random names and plate numbers. She didn't even try to deny it. She just kept saying it wasn't that deep and that she was helping someone else. The driver wasn't involved either. He was just confused, saying he got a ping for a normal ride. The whole situation felt unreal. One minute, I thought I was heading to a date, and the next, I was giving a statement to the police outside a blocked intersection. When they were done, one officer handed me back my phone and told me I could go. He said I was lucky they intervened when they did. Apparently, she'd already shared my location with someone else, though they didn't go into details. They said there were 2 other active accounts linked to her that night. I ordered another Uber, my own this time, and sat in the back seat quietly the whole way home. The driver tried to make small talk, but I couldn't focus. I kept thinking about how normal she'd seemed, how easily she played the part. She didn't flirt much, didn't say anything strange. She just acted casual and confident like she'd done this 100 times. When I got home, I checked our chat again. The messages were still there. She'd even sent me a Spotify playlist earlier that day with songs about cars and running away. It felt weirdly intentional, like a joke only she understood. Her profile was gone the next morning, deleted. A few days later, a detective called me to confirm some details. He said she'd been part of an online scam ring using stolen Uber and Lyft accounts bought from the dark web. They used them to run fake routes, track passengers, and steal from their linked bank cards. She'd use dating apps to find people willing to split rides, then save their pickup spots to resell later. I didn't even know that was a thing people could do. It freaked me out how she'd been controlling the whole night from the second she sent that car. Every time I replay it in my head, I think about how calm she was when the police showed up, like she'd expected it to happen sooner or later. Now, I never let anyone else book a ride for me. Not friends, not dates, no one. I deleted Tinder for a while too, just because every new face started to look suspicious. It's crazy how fast something can go from feeling normal to feeling like a movie scene. One minute I was sitting next to a girl laughing about snacks, and the next I was standing under blue lights while she got dragged away in cuffs. That was the first and last time I let someone else order the ride. He seemed like one of those guys who had everything figured out. His name was Damon. His Tinder profile looked like an ad for designer clothes, clean sneakers, luxury car selfies, restaurant shots, city rooftop views. His bio said, "Work hard, live harder," which should have been a red flag. But at first glance, he looked like the type that could actually back it up. He messaged me first. He had that effortless confidence, the kind that made you feel like you were the one getting lucky. He wasn't pushy, just smooth. He said he worked in retail management, which explained the clothes, and he asked if I wanted to go out the next day. I said sure, expecting the usual coffee or drinks type of thing. Instead, he said, "Let's hit the mall, my treat." Normally, I'd never go shopping with someone I just met, but he made it sound fun and harmless. He joked about helping me pick something out and said he had a gift card to spend anyway. I figured, why not? The next day, he showed up right on time. He was wearing a beige designer tracksuit, spotless white sneakers, and a gold chain that caught the sunlight every time he moved. His car matched the vibe, a shiny black BMW that looked fresh out of a showroom. When I got in, it smelled like new leather and expensive cologne. He even had bottled water waiting for me in the cup holder. He talked a lot during the drive about how he'd just gotten a promotion, how he was planning a trip to Miami, how he liked to invest in quality. The way he spoke made it sound believable. He carried himself like someone used to getting attention, and people actually looked at him when we walked through the mall doors. We went into a few stores, Nike, Zara, and then one of those high-end designer boutiques that you usually walk past but never enter. He led the way, holding the door open like he'd done this 100 times. The employees greeted him by name, or at least he made it look that way by smiling like he knew them. He told me to grab whatever I liked. I didn't take it seriously, but he meant it. He picked up 2 jackets and a pair of trainers, said he wanted to spoil me a bit. I started thinking maybe he really was that type of guy. We walked around the store for about 20 minutes. He kept getting compliments from random people on his outfit, his watch, his shoes. He'd just nod and say, "Yeah, I stay clean," like it was normal. I noticed one of the employees glance at him twice, though, then whisper something to another worker. He didn't notice. When we went to pay, he handed over his card with a confident smirk, like he already knew it would go through. The machine beeped. Declined. He laughed, said it was probably his bank security thing. Tried another card. Declined again. He brushed it off, saying he'd just transfer funds. Then a third one, same thing. I started to feel awkward standing there while the cashier stared at the screen. He looked calm but tense, like he was trying not to lose control. I offered to just pay for my stuff, but he stopped me, saying it was fine, that this happens all the time when you move money around. He pulled out his phone, acting like he was doing an online transfer, and told the cashier to try one last time. Before she even touched the machine again, someone from the back came out, a man in a black shirt with a radio clipped to his belt. Security. He asked Damon to come with him for a second. Damon looked annoyed, not scared, just frustrated. He told me to wait there and follow the guy toward the back hallway. I stood by the counter, pretending to look at some clothes, trying to ignore the employees whispering. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I was about to leave when I saw 2 police officers walking quickly toward the store. They spoke with a security guard for a few seconds before heading to the back. I froze. A few moments later, they came out with Damon in cuffs. His face was blank, completely expressionless. Everyone in the store stopped what they were doing. The manager was explaining something to the cops about an alert from another mall. I caught bits and pieces, words like stolen, reported, and surveillance footage. When they walked past me, I finally understood. His outfit, the designer tracksuit, the sneakers, the chain, was stolen. Every single thing he was wearing had been taken from another mall less than an hour earlier. They flagged the items in their system, and when he tried to make a purchase here, it triggered an alert that matched the serial numbers from the theft report. The cops found stolen tags in his pockets too, and the BMW outside wasn't even his, it was a rental under a fake name. The cologne, the clothes, even the shoes, all stolen within the same day. He wasn't rich or successful. He was just someone who knew how to look like it. They asked me to give a quick statement since I had been with him. I told them we'd met online and I had no idea. They said I wasn't in trouble but needed to confirm my info just in case. I spent the next hour sitting in the food court with 2 officers taking notes while people walked by pretending not to stare. Apparently, he'd been doing this for months, posing as a high-end buyer, using fake cards and IDs, walking into luxury stores dressed in the same brands he'd stolen earlier that day. He'd take women from dating apps to the mall as cover, so it looked like he was shopping normally. No one suspects a couple. He was on probation already, which made the whole thing worse. They said he'd likely go back to prison for theft and fraud. When they finally let me go, I walked out of the mall in silence, feeling completely stupid for not seeing any of it. His Tinder profile disappeared that same night. The next morning, I found a Reddit post about a guy matching his exact description doing the same thing in another city. Apparently, someone else had gone on a mall date with him too. Same routine. The weirdest part was how calm he stayed the entire time. No panic, no guilt, not even embarrassment. Just that same blank face as they walked him out, like he'd already accepted it would end this way. I deleted Tinder for a few months after that. Anytime I see someone wearing designer clothes now, I can't help but wonder if they actually paid for them. That was the last time I went on a date with someone who bragged about what they wore. It started like one of those nights that feel too easy to be real. I'd matched with her on Hinge the night before. Her name was Layla. Her profile looked like something out of a fashion ad. Expensive dresses, skyline selfies, neon lights in every shot. The kind of person you assume you'll never actually meet in person. Her bio said something like likes better at the top, and I figured that was just some influencer caption. She replied fast like she'd been waiting. We talked for maybe an hour before she said she was heading out to an after party the next night and I should come. She said it wasn't some club, more of a chill penthouse thing with drinks, music, and a good view. I wasn't sure if it was a date or just a hangout, but she made it sound exclusive. She even said, no phones allowed, it's private. That should have been weird, but I just thought it sounded kind of mysterious. The next evening, she sent the address. It was downtown, top floor of a glass tower near the river. When I got there, I almost turned around. The building looked too nice for anything casual. A valet took my name and handed me a pass like it was some kind of event. The elevator ride up felt endless, smooth, and silent, except for the soft music playing through hidden speakers. When the doors opened, I stepped into a hallway lined with black marble. Layla was waiting near the entrance, wearing this shiny silver dress that caught every bit of light. She smiled like she'd known me forever, grabbed my hand, and said I was right on time. Inside, it looked like something out of a movie. Dim lights, glass walls, a long view of the city glowing outside. Music played low from somewhere in the corner, not loud enough to drown out the sound of people talking. At first glance, it didn't look like a party. More like a lounge full of people who already knew each other. Men in suits, women in dresses, a few people standing around a massive table covered in chips, cards, and money. Some were laughing, some whispering, all of them with the same weird calmness. Layla led me to the bar. The bartender didn't ask what I wanted, just handed me a drink like I was already on a list. I took a sip and tried to relax, but it was hard to ignore how expensive everything looked. The floor was marble, the walls mirrored, and even the ashtrays looked custom made. I asked her what this place actually was, and she just smiled, saying it was an after party for people who know how to have fun. She leaned in and said most of the people here worked in finance or hospitality. I didn't really understand, but I nodded. After a while, she introduced me to a few people. Everyone had that polished, quiet confidence that comes with money. One guy in a suit kept stacking poker chips while barely looking at his cards. Another was watching a monitor showing different camera angles of the building, like security footage. Then I noticed something off. Nobody had their phones out. Not one person. I reached for mine, and Layla stopped me gently, saying I didn't need it. She laughed like it was no big deal, but I caught a flash of irritation behind her smile. I slipped it back into my pocket. As the night went on, more people arrived. The music got louder. A few of them started exchanging cash for stacks of chips, whispering numbers to a guy behind a glass table. It slowly hit me that this wasn't just some rich person hangout. It was a full-on gambling setup. Layla leaned over and said she helped organize these things sometimes. She said it so casually, like it was totally normal. Apparently, the penthouse belonged to a client who liked to host exclusive events. I tried to act chill, but the whole vibe had shifted from exciting to tense. I told her I didn't gamble much. She said it didn't matter, that I should just enjoy myself. She started walking around, greeting people, whispering things to the dealers. Every time she passed, people nodded like she was in charge. About an hour later, the energy in the room changed. I can't explain it, but people started glancing at the door more often. The guy watching the monitors stood up suddenly and said something to Layla under his breath. She froze for a second, then told him to check the stairwell. Seconds later, the lights cut out. Not fully, just dimmed enough to make everything feel wrong. The music stopped. Then came the pounding. Loud, heavy banging on the front door, followed by muffled shouting. Nobody moved at first, then it all happened fast. Someone yelled to turn everything off. People started grabbing chips, cash, drinks, anything to hide the evidence. A man near the back flipped the table, spilling cards everywhere. Layla sprinted toward the bar, yelling for someone to get the boxes. The door burst open. SWAT officers stormed in, yelling commands I couldn't even process. Flashlights hit every corner of the room. One guy near me dropped to the floor. Another tried to run toward a side door, but got tackled instantly. I just stood there, hands up, trying not to move. The noise was insane. Boots, radios, shouts, glass-breaking. Layla was on the ground, her hands behind her head, her calm smile finally gone. One of the officers dragged her up and said something about her name being on a warrant. I heard them say the words illegal gambling operation and fraud investigation. They handcuffed at least 10 people. The rest were searched and questioned. One officer asked for my ID and how I got there. I told him I met Layla on an app and thought it was a normal party. He didn't even look surprised. He just said I wasn't the first one to say that. Apparently, they'd been watching the penthouse for weeks. Layla wasn't just some hostess. She was running the front end of the operation, luring new people in to make it look like a legitimate social event. The building had been under surveillance because the unit had connections to a bigger ring involving money laundering and fake business accounts. They found thousands of dollars in cash, hidden behind mirrors and under tables. Even the bartender was in on it. Everyone acted so calm at first because they'd done it before. It took hours before they let me go. I sat in a hallway outside the penthouse, answering the same questions over and over. When I finally got my phone back, there were missed calls from friends wondering where I was. The elevator ride down felt even longer than when I'd arrived. The next day, the story was already online. Downtown penthouse raid. Illegal casino busted. Layla's mugshot was right there, still somehow looking confident even in an orange jumpsuit. The article said she'd been running similar events for over a year, switching buildings and using fake event names to keep police guessing. I deleted the app that same morning. Every time I pass those glass towers now, I think about that night. The sound of the door being kicked in, the flashlights, the moment everything went from cool to chaos in seconds. I still wonder if she planned to invite me there just as a cover, another random face in the crowd to make the place look normal. Probably. That was the first and last time I ever went to an after party. He seemed normal. That's what everyone says after something goes wrong. But he really did. His name was Ethan. We met on Bumble after I changed my profile to animal lover looking for someone the same. His first message was about my dog in one of my photos. He said he volunteered at a local dog rescue on weekends and that I should come visit sometime. That's what hooked me. He talked about it like it was the best part of his week, how he loved seeing abandoned dogs find homes, how it was all nonprofit and run by volunteers. He sent photos too. Dogs in cages, a few on leashes, one with him kneeling beside it. He looked so proud in those pictures. There wasn't anything off about it. We talked for a week before meeting. He kept saying I'd love the place, that it was small but full of heart. I didn't even question it. We planned to grab lunch first, then visit the rescue. He picked me up in this old white van that had a paw print magnet on the side. It wasn't creepy looking, just kind of run down. The inside smelled like dog shampoo and air freshener. He said it was what they used to transport the dogs sometimes, so it made sense. Lunch was fine. He talked about the rescue almost the whole time, how they were always short on funding, how he'd sometimes pay for food and medicine himself. It made him sound like one of those rare decent guys who actually care about something. After we ate, he said we could go check out the place since it wasn't too far. The drive took about 20 minutes out of town into this industrial area near some warehouses. I thought it was weird for a dog rescue to be out there, but he said the rent was cheaper. When we pulled up, there was a chain link fence and a big metal building with faded paint. A wooden sign out front said, "Second Chance Paws." Inside, the air was thick with that mix of disinfectant and wet dog smell. I could hear barking from the back, and there were cages lined up against the walls. Some had blankets, others didn't. There were maybe 15 dogs, mostly small breeds, a few bigger ones. None of them looked sick, but something about it felt off. They all had collars. Not the cheap kind rescues usually use, actual leather ones with name tags. I asked where they got the dogs, and he said mostly from bad homes or abandonment cases. He didn't really go into detail. He just kept smiling, petting one of the dogs through the cage bars. He said he needed to check something in the back office and told me I could look around. I walked down the aisle, trying to calm a nervous-looking terrier that kept pacing in circles. That's when I noticed some of the tags still had phone numbers on them. Not rescue tags, personal ones. I thought maybe they hadn't removed them yet. In one of the cages, a golden retriever had a collar that said Milo. The tag looked brand new. I remembered seeing a post online a few days earlier about a missing golden named Milo from a nearby neighborhood group. It hit me so fast that I almost dropped my phone. I pulled it out, searched the post again, and it was the same dog. Same name, same little white spot on the chest. Before I could think, Ethan came back out of the office holding a clipboard. I shoved my phone in my pocket and tried to act normal. He said he had to take a few of the dogs out for a rehoming prep and asked if I wanted to help. I nodded, but my hands were shaking. He opened the back door that led to another smaller room, and that's when I saw it. Dozens of collars hanging on hooks. Not organized, just stuffed together. Some had names scratched into them. Others had tags still attached. A couple of cages were empty, but still had fresh food and water bowls inside, like dogs had just been there. I tried to back up slowly, but before I could, there was a sudden loud bang outside. Then more. Not like fireworks, more like someone slamming doors. Ethan froze. His face went blank for the first time since I met him. Then I heard shouting. Within seconds, the door burst open. Police. They shouted commands, telling him to put his hands up. He didn't move at first, just stood there like he was trying to figure out if he could run. Then one of the officers pointed straight at him, yelling louder, and he finally dropped to the floor. I stood there completely still while another officer came over and guided me outside. The parking lot was full of flashing lights, vans, animal control trucks, everything. One of the officers asked if I was with him. I said I was just visiting, I had no idea. They told me to sit on the curb while they checked the place. Turns out it wasn't a rescue at all. The whole operation was a front for stolen pets. Ethan and a few others had been stealing dogs from neighborhoods and selling them online or through fake adoption listings. He'd post before and after photos to make it look like he was saving them, but most of the animals were just being flipped for cash. The collars, the tags, even the second chance paws sign, completely fake. They found stolen microchip scanners in the back office, along with cash envelopes and adoption forms with fake names. Some of the dogs had already been moved to another building the night before, but animal control managed to recover most of them. I had to give a statement, explain how I met him and how long I'd known him. The cops told me they'd been tracking him for weeks after multiple reports of stolen dogs matching the ones he posted online. They hadn't been able to locate the warehouse until that night. I stayed there for almost 3 hours while they took photos and loaded the dogs into vans. I couldn't stop thinking about the owners, about all the people who probably thought they'd never see their pets again. When it was finally over, I got a ride home with one of the officers. He told me I was lucky, that Ethan had a record for theft and breaking into homes, but no one had connected it to pets before. Apparently, he used dating apps to look for people with dogs or people who loved animals so he could make his rescue sound more real. When I got home, I couldn't sleep. I went through my messages with him again. Every photo he'd sent of rescued dogs was probably stolen from someone's house. The next day, I checked the same neighborhood group I'd seen before. There was a new post, Milo found safe. Thank you to everyone who shared. The photo was of the same golden retriever, smiling in a backyard. I deleted Bumble right after that. That was the first and last time I ever believed a guy who said he worked with animals. It started normal. She seemed sweet, like genuinely soft-spoken kind and kind of quirky in that artsy way. Her name was Mira. We matched on Hinge after I mentioned liking chill nights and quiet spots. She said she worked at a candle shop downtown and loved making her own scents. Her profile was full of pictures of jars, labels, little wax shapes, all with cozy lighting. It looked harmless. We talked for about a week before meeting. She wasn't pushy about it, but she was the one who suggested hanging out. She said she'd be working late and invited me to stop by the shop when it closed. She said we could light some candles, play music, and talk while she restocked inventory. It sounded wholesome enough. The shop was in one of those older parts of the city, brick buildings, vintage stores, small coffee shops. When I got there, it was already dark, and all the other businesses were closed except hers. The windows had fairy lights around the edges, and the words Wax and Wane were painted in gold script across the glass. Inside, I could see rows of candles in every color, some in glass jars, some in tins, some shaped like flowers or fruit. It smelled incredible even from the door. She looked exactly like her pictures, dark hair tied up, apron on, soft smile. She waved when I walked in, said she was just closing up but told me I could hang around. She locked the door behind me, flipped the sign to closed, and said it was just to keep people from wandering in. I didn't think twice about it. We walked around while she pointed out some of her favorite scents. She said she made most of them herself in the back room, which she called her lab. I thought she was joking. She laughed when I said that and told me it was just her workspace. The place was small but cozy. Shelves lined the walls, filled with jars labeled with names like Autumn Rain and Cinnamon Meadow. There was a faint hum coming from the back, like a small machine or fan running. I assumed it was a wax melter or something. She poured us both some tea from a thermos she'd brought and said she liked staying after hours because it was peaceful. We sat behind the counter for a while, talking about random stuff. Music, food, pets. She had this calm energy that made everything feel easy. The only thing that threw me off was how often she kept glancing at the clock, like she was waiting for something. After a while, she said she needed to grab something from the back room. She asked if I wanted to see how the candles were made. I said sure. She smiled and led me through a door behind the counter. The second we stepped inside, the smell changed. It wasn't the warm wax smell anymore. It was sharp, chemical, almost sour. The room was bigger than I expected, filled with metal tables and equipment that didn't look like anything you need to make candles. There were glass tubes, digital scales, small burners, and boxes stacked in the corner with no labels. A few fans were running to vent the air. She noticed me looking and said she was experimenting with essential oil blends. I nodded, but something about it felt off. There were too many bottles, too many machines. Some of the containers weren't even labeled, just jars of white powder and sealed bags with codes written in marker. I tried to act casual, but my gut started twisting. She seemed comfortable, like this was normal for her. She showed me how she poured wax, added oils, stirred mixtures, but she was oddly protective about some of the containers. Whenever I got too close to a certain table, she'd step in front of it. Then I heard a sound outside, car doors, multiple of them. It wasn't loud music or random traffic noise. It was fast, coordinated. Before I could even turn toward the front, bright lights flashed through the shop windows. She froze instantly, her entire face changing. Calm to panic in a split second. She whispered something under her breath, grabbed her phone, and started deleting something quickly. Then the front door burst open. Police shouted from the front of the store, ordering her to come out. The sound was deafening. Boots hitting the floor, radios crackling. I raised my hands before they even reached us. Within seconds, 2 officers were in the back room, yelling for us not to move. They cuffed her immediately. One of them pulled me aside while the others started searching everything. The officer asked if I worked there. I said no, that I'd just come to visit. He didn't look surprised. The rest of the night was chaos. They brought in more people, detectives, forensic techs, even a van marked hazmat. They started bagging items, taking photos, sealing containers. The chemical smell got stronger once they started opening stuff. One of the officers told me quietly that this wasn't just a candle shop. It was a cover for a small-scale drug lab. Apparently, it'd been watching it for months after neighbors reported strange shipments being dropped off late at night. The candles were used to disguise the smell from production and ship small quantities of powder hidden in wax jars. She was one of the main people running it. I just stood there in shock while they read her rights. She didn't fight it. She just stared at the ground like it was already over. They questioned me for almost 2 hours. How I met her and what she told me, how long I'd known her. I showed them our messages, all the normal conversations about candles, work, and music. They said she was smart about it, always keeping her personal life separate from what she did here. When they finally let me go, the shop was a mess. Broken glass on the floor, police tape on the door, and that same chemical smell hanging in the air. Outside, a small crowd had gathered, people whispering, phones out recording. I kept my head down and walked away. The next day, I searched her name online. There were already articles about the raid. Local candle shop uncovered as drug front. They said the operation had been active for nearly a year, distributing products disguised as aromatherapy sets. The owner was her cousin, but she was the one running it most nights. I deleted the app after that. Every photo of her I'd read online looked completely different from the girl I met. Same face, same calm smile, but now it looked fake, like she'd been performing the whole time. Now, whenever I walk past a candle shop, I can't even stand the smell. It just reminds me of that back room, the noise of the fans, the sharp scent of chemicals, and the moment everything crashed in. That was the first and last time I ever went to someone's workplace for a first date. I matched with him on a random Tuesday night. His name was Aaron. He didn't have one of those over-the-top profiles, just 3 photos, all normal looking. One in a cafe, one by a lake, and one sitting on a bench reading. His bio just said he liked quiet places and good conversation. That was it. Simple. He wasn't flirty or weird, just polite. He used proper sentences, didn't rush anything. Most guys try to push for a date right away, but he didn't. We actually talked for a few days about movies, old bands, and random stuff about the city. He said he recently moved back after living somewhere else for a while. He didn't say where, and I didn't ask. After a few days, he asked if I wanted to grab a coffee somewhere calm, not downtown, but near the park. It sounded casual, safe, and he even offered to meet me outside the cafe so I wouldn't have to wander around looking for him. I said yes. When I got there, he was already sitting outside, waiting. He looked exactly like his photos. Dark jacket, neat hair, glasses, and that same quiet smile. The first thing I noticed was how calm he seemed. Most people fidget or check their phones, but he just sat still, watching the trees like he had nowhere else to be. He stood up when I walked over, polite again. We ordered drinks and sat outside at one of those metal tables near the corner. It wasn't crowded, just a few people walking dogs were jogging past. The weather was cloudy but not cold, kind of perfect for a long talk. The conversation started normal. He asked about my job, my family, what I like to do. He listened more than he talked, and when he did speak, it was quiet and deliberate. No weird topics, no awkward moments. He just seemed like a calm, well-mannered guy who preferred listening. I remember thinking it was refreshing to talk to someone like that. There was no pressure, no weird vibe, but after maybe 20 minutes, something small started to feel off. It wasn't anything he said. It was how vague he was about everything personal. When I asked where he was from originally, he said, a few towns over. When I asked what he did for work, he said, a little bit of everything. He'd smile, change the subject, and ask me something instead. At first, I brushed it off. Some people are just private, but then something weird caught my eye. Behind him, across the street, there was a utility pole covered in posters and flyers, lost cats, band ads, garage sales. One of the papers was flapping in the wind, and for some reason, it caught my attention. The photo on it looked weirdly familiar. I squinted at it while he was talking. It was his face. I froze completely. Same hair, same glasses, same exact face. The poster said, missing at the top in bold letters. The rest of it was hard to read from that distance, but I could make out a few words, his name, Aaron, and a date from almost 3 weeks ago. My heart started racing. I didn't want to make it obvious, so I nodded along like I was still listening. He noticed me looking distracted and asked if I was okay. I forced a smile and said something about zoning out. My voice cracked when I said it. He smiled again, the same calm smile, but his eyes didn't move from my face for a long second. It felt like he was trying to figure out what I was thinking. I looked away immediately, pretending to check my phone. I tried to casually take another glance at the poster to be sure I wasn't imagining it. It was him. No doubt. The photo looked slightly older. He had longer hair, but it was the same man. I could see part of the text now. Missing since October 12th. Last seen near the city park. Family seeking information. He leaned back in his chair then, sipping his drink slowly, watching me. The air between us went heavy. I didn't even know what to say. My mind was spinning with 100 questions. If he was missing, why was he here? Why did someone post that? Was it bold? A joke? I excused myself to use the restroom, pretending to laugh about how much coffee I'd had. He nodded, still smiling, still polite. As soon as I was out of sight, I pulled my phone out and searched his name. The first result was a local news article. Search continues for missing man, 27. It had his picture. Same face, same glasses, same soft expression. It said his family last heard from him 3 weeks ago, and that police suspected foul play. I froze in the hallway, just staring at it. I didn't know if I should run, call someone, or go back out there. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the phone. I decided to text my friend instead of calling, just a quick message saying, "Call me right now." She called within seconds. I answered quietly, trying to keep my voice low. I told her where I was and what I'd just seen. She told me to get out of there immediately and call the police. I hung up and started walking back toward the front, trying to look calm. When I stepped outside, he was gone. His chair was empty, coffee cup still on the table, but he was nowhere in sight. I looked around, thinking maybe he'd gone inside or to the restroom, but the whole area suddenly felt wrong. I turned toward the street and saw him standing near the light pole where the posters were. He was staring up at his own face. Then he turned toward me, caught my eye, and started walking fast, not running, but fast enough that I panicked. I pulled out my phone again and dialed 911, barely able to explain what was happening. Before I could even finish, he glanced over his shoulder at the sound of sirens coming from the next street over and bolted. He ran into an alley behind the cafe and disappeared. Police showed up within minutes. They searched everywhere around the block, but didn't find him. When I showed them the article and told them what happened, one of the officers said the missing person case was still active and that there had been possible sightings near that area before. They told me I did the right thing by calling. I stayed until they finished searching and took my statement and asked me to describe him in detail, though they already had the photo from the poster. They said there were rumors that he changed his name and was living under different identities, but no one knew why. When I finally left, the cafe looked completely normal again. People were sitting outside, drinking coffee like nothing happened. The poster was still flapping on the pole, the edges torn from the wind. I read it one more time before walking away. Under his photo in small print, it said, "It seemed do not approach. Call police immediately." I deleted the app that night. Every new match after that just made my stomach turn. Sometimes I still wonder if he saw that poster before I did, and if he brought me there on purpose. That was the last time I ever met anyone from a dating app in person. It was one of those cold mornings where you wake up scrolling just to waste time. And that's when I matched with her. Her name was Alina. Her profile stood out because she wasn't posing in fancy bars or clubs, just pictures of her behind a coffee truck, holding cups, wearing a beanie, and smiling like she genuinely loved what she did. Her bio said, "Fueling mornings 1 cup at a time." It felt down to earth. We talked for a few days, and she told me she ran a small mobile coffee business. She said she was parked behind a supermarket for the week, testing out new blends before moving to a new location. She joked that I should come by for a free latte and in good company. It sounded harmless, so I said sure. She texted me directions instead of sending a pin. It was weirdly specific. Turn left at the back loading dock, past the dumpsters, then you'll see my truck. She said it was just quieter there, away from the morning rush. I didn't think about it too much. When I got there, the back lot was mostly empty except for delivery vans. The ground was slick from the rain earlier, and there were seagulls picking through trash bins. I spotted a small white truck tucked behind the loading area, painted with a big brown coffee cup on the side and fairy lights strung across the window. It looked cozy, but a little out of place. Alina was already there, wearing the same beanie from her photos, waving as soon as she saw me. She looked exactly like she did online, cute, casual, friendly, the kind of person who'd make you feel welcome in seconds. She leaned out of the truck window and said she'd been up since sunrise. I walked up, and the smell hit me first: coffee, vanilla, and caramel. She handed me a paper cup before I even ordered, saying it was her signature blend. The coffee was actually good, strong but smooth. I stood by the truck while she made another cup for herself, talking about how she'd started the business last year after quitting her office job. She said she liked the freedom of it. There was a little speaker playing soft music, and she seemed relaxed, chatting while cleaning her milk frother and refilling the sugar canisters. The setup inside looked professional. Espresso machine, grinder, syrup bottles lined up neatly, but something small felt off. There were no prices anywhere, no menu board, no signs except the painted logo on the side. I asked how long she'd been parked here. She said just a few days, and that she was planning to move locations soon. When I asked where, she paused for a second before saying wherever the weather's nice. She laughed after, but it sounded a little forced. We talked for a while about music, travel, how she didn't really like social media. Every now and then, she glanced for the main road like she was watching for someone. I thought maybe she was expecting a supplier or something. Then I noticed something weird. On the side of the truck, the paint was chipped around the door, and part of the original logo was still visible underneath. It wasn't the same design. It said, Brew Loud Coffee Co. in smaller faded letters. It looked like someone had just painted over it in a hurry. Before I could ask, she said she needed to grab something from the back of the truck and disappear behind it. I sipped my drink and pulled out my phone to check the time. That's when I heard the sound of tires screeching. 2 police cars turned into the lot fast, lights flashing. I thought they were chasing someone else at first, but they stopped right behind the truck. Officers jumped out immediately, yelling for her to come out. I froze, cup in hand, completely confused. One of them told me to step back, asking if I worked there. I said no, I was just meeting someone. He told me to move away from the vehicle. Within seconds, 2 more officers appeared, one heading around the side with a hand on his gun. Alina stepped out from the back, her hands up, her calm face gone. She kept saying it was a mistake, that the truck was hers. They cuffed her right there on the spot. I just stood there like an idiot watching it happen. One officer started checking the license plate, and another called something in over the radio. Apparently, the coffee truck had been reported stolen 2 weeks ago from a catering company in another town. The original owner had been tracking it with a GPS device hidden under the floor, which led the police straight to this parking lot. The logo I'd seen under the paint, Brewlab Coffee Co., was the original business name. She'd literally just painted over it and kept using it as her own. The worst part, the police said this wasn't her first time. She'd been running the scam for months, stealing small catering or vending vehicles, repainting them, and pretending to own mobile coffee stands in different cities. She'd set up for a few days, earn cash, disappear before anyone noticed, then move to another area. They found fake business permits in her bag and a burner phone inside the truck with dozens of contacts saved under random names. They said she was being investigated for theft, fraud, and possibly other charges. One officer asked me to wait while they checked my ID and took my statement. I told them everything. How we met, what she said, how long we talked. They said I was lucky I didn't give her any money because she'd also been scamming people out of deposits for private events. She'd take bookings through fake websites and vanish afterward. After about half an hour, they towed the truck away. The lot went completely quiet again, except for the hum of the supermarket fans and the faint smell of coffee still in the air. I walked back to my car, still processing what just happened. My hands were shaking, and the cup I'd been holding felt cold. It was crazy to think that for an hour, I'd been sitting there drinking coffee from a stolen truck, thinking it was just another first date. The next day, I checked the local news, and there it was. Woman arrested after stolen coffee truck found operating behind supermarket. The article said she'd been wanted in 3 different towns for similar thefts. The police had been tracking her for a week before finally catching up. Her photos were the same ones from her dating profile, smiling behind the counter, wearing that same beanie. It didn't even look real anymore, like someone playing a character. I deleted her number in the app that night. Every time I pass one of those coffee trucks now, I still look at the logo just to make sure it's not painted over. That was the first and last time I ever met someone behind a supermarket. He seemed like the perfect guy at first. His name was Nathan, and he had that calm confidence that made you believe whatever he said. His Hinge profile looked legit too. Clean photos in nice clothes, one of him in scrubs, another holding the coffee outside a hospital with a stethoscope around his neck. His bio said, Doctor, Cardiology. Too busy saving lives to argue about pineapple on pizza. It was corny but believable. We started talking late one night. He was funny, but in a quiet, mature way. He said he didn't use dating apps much because of his schedule, that most of his life revolved around the hospital. It made sense. His messages would come at odd times, 2 a.m., 6 a.m., but that matched what a doctor's hours might be. He told me he'd just moved to my city after finishing a contract in another state. He said he'd opened a small private practice not far from downtown. I was impressed. He talked about how it was something he worked hard for, how he wanted to build something personal after years of hospital chaos. After a few days, he asked if I wanted to meet. He said his schedule was packed, but he could sneak away for a late dinner near his clinic. I agreed. When I got to the restaurant, he was already there. He looked exactly like his photos, tall, neat, good posture, and wearing that same quiet smile. He was dressed in scrubs under a jacket, which felt like proof that he really was who he said he was. He ordered quickly, talked about work, about patients, about the stress of dealing with the system. It all sounded real. He even used medical terms casually, like it was second nature. There was nothing fake about it. After dinner, he said he had to head back to his office to grab something, but invited me to stop by since it was close. I hesitated but figured it wasn't weird. He wasn't taking me home, just showing me his practice. He said it'd only be for a few minutes, and honestly, curiosity got the better of me. The building wasn't what I expected. It was a plain 2-story office complex behind a pharmacy, mostly empty at night. A faded sign by the entrance read, Health Services, but it looked old, like no one had updated it in years. He said he was renting one of the suites while he built up clients. Inside, it was quiet and smelled faintly like disinfectant. The lights were dim, just a few lamps on. There were exam tables, cabinets, and charts on the wall. It looked real enough. He grabbed a set of keys from his pocket and unlocked a side door leading to another room. That one was smaller, darker, and had shelves lined with boxes and bottles. He said it was medical inventory. He joked about how he hated dealing with paperwork for controlled meds. I laughed weakly, still thinking everything was fine, but something about how secretive he was started to feel weird. Then, out of nowhere, bright lights filled the hallway, red and blue flashing through the window. A loud voice shouted from outside, ordering someone to open the door. Nathan froze. His whole expression changed instantly, from calm to completely blank. He muttered something under his breath, turned toward the back exit, and then there was pounding on the front door. He didn't even try to open it. Within seconds, it flew open and police officers swarmed in. Everything happened so fast I barely had time to move. They shouted for him to get down, hands up. One officer pulled me aside while the others tackled him to the ground. He didn't fight it, just stared at the floor, breathing hard. They cuffed him right there in the middle of the fake clinic. An officer asked me who I was. I told him I was just a date, that I'd met him on an app and thought he was a doctor. The officer's expression said he'd heard that before. They searched the rooms while another detective started asking questions. Turns out, Nathan wasn't a doctor at all. He'd been impersonating medical staff for months, sneaking into clinics and pharmacies using fake credentials. The practice wasn't his. It was an abandoned office space he'd broken into and filled with stolen equipment from real hospitals. He'd been using the setup to access restricted medications and narcotics. The bottles on the shelves weren't supplies for patients. They were drugs stolen from hospital storage. Some still had inventory tags on them. They found fake ID badges, lab coats with his name embroidered, and a laptop full of forged documents. He'd been posing as a doctor to get into medical facilities after hours, using fake references to order shipments under real hospital names. He'd apparently been caught once before in another state, but skipped bail and vanished. I stood there while they took photos, collected evidence, and read him his rights. He didn't say a word the entire time, just stared at the floor, that calm expression completely gone. The detective told me he'd been luring women from dating apps as part of the act. It made him seem legitimate, like a professional man with a real career. They said he even convinced some of them to help him order supplies or transport samples that were actually stolen drugs. They asked if he'd ever given me anything to hold or deliver. I said no. Thank God. It took hours before they let me go. They kept asking the same questions over and over, making sure I wasn't involved. When I finally stepped outside, the parking lot was lit up with flashing lights, and the pharmacy staff from next door were standing around watching. I could see the look on their faces when they realized who he was. The next morning, it was all over the news. Fake doctor arrested after months of impersonation. The photo they used was one of his dating app pictures. Him in the scrubs, smiling, holding a coffee. The article said he'd been accessing controlled substances, stealing medical records, and using multiple fake identities. They found several driver's licenses and passports with his face under different names. The comments online were full of stories from other people who claimed they'd met him. A few said he talked about owning a clinic. One woman said he took her on a tour of a hospital wing that was actually a maintenance corridor. Looking back, all the small details make sense now. The weird hours, the vague answers, the nervous glances when people passed our table at dinner. I'd ignored it because he seemed calm and kind. That night, I deleted Hinge. But the weirdest part was the next day when I checked my messages. His profile was still active for a few hours after the arrest. Someone else had already liked one of his pictures. That was the first and last time I ever trusted a man who said he wore scrubs. It started with her profile looking too put together to be fake. Her name was Sienna. Every photo looked like it was ripped straight from an influencer's feed. Studio lighting, minimal outfits, perfect filters, and this clean white aesthetic that made her look like she belonged in a fashion ad. Her bio said something about marketing and content creation for emerging brands. It sounded legit. We matched on a Sunday night. She messaged first, saying she liked my jacket in one of my photos and that it gave model energy. I laughed it off, but she kept the conversation going easily. She wasn't flirty, more professional, but still friendly, like she knew exactly what to say to keep my attention. A few days in, she told me she was running a small shoot that weekend and for a skincare brand she was collaborating with. She said they needed a few natural-looking people to pose as customers for promotional shots, just casual lifestyle pictures. She said they'd pay in free products and lunch. It didn't sound suspicious, just random. At first, I said I wasn't really into that kind of thing, but she insisted it'd be fun, chill, and that there'd be other people there too. She sent me the address, a studio space in an industrial area about 20 minutes from the city center. She even sent a Google link to what looked like a real photography rental spot with clean white walls and huge windows. By the time Saturday came, I figured why not? I'd never been part of something like that before. She texted me that morning to remind me to wear plain clothes and said they'd style me up when I arrived. When I got there, the place looked real enough. A warehouse converted into a creative studio with white curtains, bright lighting, racks of clothes, and a big table full of makeup products and camera gear. There were a few people already inside, 2 girls folding clothes, and one guy setting up lights. Sienna waved when she saw me, wearing a long beige coat and holding a clipboard like she was in charge. She thanked me for coming and introduced me to everyone. Everyone seemed relaxed, talking about lighting angles, poses, and product shots. There was a whole table full of boxed skincare bottles with sleek packaging, all branded with some fancy logo I didn't recognize, something like Lumaskin. She said it was a new European brand launching in the UK soon. I sat down while a makeup artist touched up my face. The photographer, an older guy with a heavy camera, gave me quick directions. He said it'd just be me pretending to apply the skincare and smile toward the lens. Easy stuff. Sienna was everywhere, fixing the placement of products, checking lighting, arranging bottles into neat rows. She looked confident, like she'd done this 100 times before. The energy in the room was calm, everyone moving like part of a real team. After about 20 minutes, though, things started to feel weird. The products didn't look sealed properly. Some had mismatched labels. A few were clearly printed stickers that didn't align right on the bottles. One box said, "Made in Germany." Another said, "Formulated in Korea." The text looked slightly off. I thought maybe it was just a test batch or pre-launch samples. Then I noticed the photographer whispering to Sienna, holding one of the boxes and pointing at it. She brushed it off and told him to keep shooting. A few minutes later, the side door opened and two more people walked in carrying cardboard boxes. They weren't dressed like part of a photo shoot team. One was wearing a hoodie and they didn't speak to anyone, just dropped the boxes behind the curtain near the back. Sienna rushed over, whispering something fast and sharp. The others pretended not to notice. I started to feel like I shouldn't be there. Then the sound of engines outside broke through the noise of the lights and chatter. Multiple vehicles pulling up fast, tires screeching. Before anyone could react, the front door burst open. Police stormed in, full uniform, shouting for everyone to stay where they were. The photographer froze mid-shot. One of the assistants screamed, and I nearly dropped the bottle I was holding. They spread out fast, checking IDs, ordering everyone to put their hands up. Sienna tried to stay calm, saying it was just a shoot, that they were working with a brand, but the police ignored her. They started tearing open the boxes near the curtain and pulling out piles of counterfeit beauty products, cheap bottles, fake packaging, and labels printed on plain paper. Turns out the entire photo shoot was part of a front for a counterfeit product operation. They'd been producing fake cosmetics and rebranding them as luxury imports, using influencer shoots to make everything look legitimate online. The police had been tracking the operation for weeks after reports of people getting skin reactions from products bought through social media ads. The warehouse had been raided before under a different name. They just changed branding and kept moving locations. Sienna wasn't just a model or marketer. She was one of the organizers. She recruited random people from dating apps and freelance sites to pose in shoots to make the scam look real. It gave her more social proof to use in ads. The photographer wasn't even in on it. He'd been hired last minute and paid in cash. While they questioned everyone, Sienna kept quiet. She didn't argue or try to explain. She just stood there while the police handcuffed her and read her rights. One of the officers said they'd found fake invoices and hundreds of counterfeit labels inside her car. When it was my turn to talk, I told them everything. How we met, how she said it was just a casual shoot, and how I thought it was a legit brand. They said I wasn't in trouble, that they'd already suspected she was using dating apps to find people she could use as fake customers. They took my statement and told me to leave once they confirmed my name wasn't tied to anything. When I stepped outside, the whole lot was filled with police vans and unmarked cars. The fairy lights inside the warehouse still glowed faintly through the window, flashing red and blue from the lights outside. Later that night, I searched her name. The news already had it. Influencer marketing scam busted in local warehouse. The article said she and two others had been producing fake luxury skincare for over a year, earning thousands selling through fake online stores. They'd use models and fake press shoots to make it look like a startup brand launch. Her dating profile disappeared the same day. Now, anytime someone says they work in brand marketing, I think about that day, the flash of police lights, the cheap smell of perfume from those fake bottles, and how I almost ended up in the background of a criminal investigation over a fake lotion commercial. That was the last time I ever said yes to helping someone with a photo shoot. It started off normal, like one of those chill first dates you don't expect much from. His name was Kyle. He had a short bio on Bumble that said something like movies, gym, and making people laugh. His pictures were casual, hoodie cap, that typical gring guys do when they think they look mysterious. He mentioned he made videos sometimes, but I thought that just meant funny TikToks like everyone else. He was easy to talk to, not overly charming, not trying too hard, just friendly. We texted for a few days about random stuff, films, bad food takes, weekend plans. He said he loved horror movies and that there was a new one coming out Friday. He offered to take me to see it, saying it was his kind of thing. I didn't think much of it. I like movies and public dates feel safer. We agreed to meet outside the theater at 8. When I got there, he was already waiting, leaning against the poster board like he'd been there for a while. He waved as soon as he saw me, holding popcorn and 2 drinks. He looked exactly like his pictures, which was already a relief. We got our tickets, joked a bit about how empty the place looked, and went inside. The theater wasn't packed, just a few grouped here and there. It was one of those smaller screenings with 10 rows, total dim lighting, and that faint smell of popcorn mixed with something metallic from the vents. We sat near the middle, far enough from people, but not isolated. He was funny at first, making quiet comments about the trailers. Nothing weird. About 15 minutes into the movie, I noticed a small light flicker near his lap. I thought maybe he was checking his phone, but when I glanced over, he wasn't holding it like someone scrolling. He had it tilted slightly forward, angled up toward the screen and the people in front of us. I figured he was texting at first, but then the light stayed steady. He noticed me looking and quickly covered it with his jacket. He smiled and whispered something like, "Just checking notification." I didn't want to make it awkward, so I nodded and went back to watching, but my stomach started to feel off. A few minutes later, it happened again. The glow under his jacket. This time, he lifted his phone a little higher, like he was recording something. I couldn't tell what. I glanced around, but no one else seemed to notice. I leaned back slightly to peek, and I saw the small red circle on his screen, the one that means record. I froze. I wasn't sure if he was filming the screen or people, but either way, it was weird. I tried to ignore it, telling myself maybe he was one of those people who does movie reactions for YouTube. But filming inside a theater? That didn't sound right. Halfway through the movie, two people got up from the front row and left quietly. Kyle leaned forward, lifting his jacket again, angling the phone toward them. I caught a glimpse of his screen for a second. It wasn't aimed at the movie, it was aimed at people's faces. My chest tightened. He wasn't filming the movie at all, he was filming the audience. He whispered something to himself and smiled when someone in front of us jumped out a loud scene. That's when I realized he was recording people's reactions, like a hidden camera thing. He wasn't watching the movie, he was watching everyone else. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to cause a scene, but it felt wrong. I leaned slightly away from him, holding my drink just to give my hand something to do. About 10 minutes later, the theater doors opened and light spilled in. Two men walked in slowly. Not theater staff, police officers. They started down the aisle quietly, flashlights in hand. My pulse spiked instantly. Kyle didn't notice at first, so focused on his screen. Then one of the flashlights hit us. He froze. His phone slipped from his hand, landing on the floor with a small clatter. The officer shouted for him to stand up. Everyone in the theater turned to look. The movie kept playing behind it all, loud and chaotic, completely out of place. They told him to keep his hands visible and step into the aisle. He tried to say something, but they cut him off, taking his phone and putting it into an evidence bag. I sat completely still, not even breathing properly. The officer next to me asked if I was with him. I said yes, but barely managed to get the words out. They told me to stay seated until they finished. Turns out, Kyle had been filming people in multiple theaters for months, getting their reactions during horror or emotional scenes, then uploading them online for his reaction channel. He'd hide small cameras in his jacket, sometimes even on the seat armrest, and splice together clips without anyone's consent. It started as harmless audience footage, but then he started focusing on individuals, zooming in on faces, laughing at their expressions, even making crew captions. Someone recognized themselves in one of his videos and reported it. That led to an investigation, and theater security had been tipped off to look for him that night. They tracked his card purchase and waited for him to show up. The officers let him out while the whole room sat in stunned silence. The movie kept playing, but no one was watching it anymore. I just sat there, trying to process that the guy I came here with was literally filming strangers in the dark for views. After they left, a manager came in and paused the movie, apologizing to everyone. They refunded tickets, but I barely heard any of it. My mind was stuck on the fact that he'd probably been recording the whole time we were sitting there too. One of the officers came back later and asked me to give a statement. I told them everything. How we met, what he said, how he'd been acting weird during the movie. They said he'd been warned before, but kept moving to different theaters under different names. His channel had tens of thousands of followers, all built off of secret videos. When I finally left, the lobby lights felt too bright. My reflection in the glass doors looked pale and stiff. I kept thinking about how many people probably watched themselves online without knowing it, laughing at something they didn't even agree to be part of. I deleted Bumble that night. A few days later, his channel was gone. News articles popped up saying he'd been charged with illegal recording and invasion of privacy. There was a blurred photo of him being escorted out of a theater, and even though I knew it was him, it didn't feel real. The guy I met online, who seemed normal and funny, was just using people as props. Every time I go to the movies now, I still catch myself glancing around before the lights dim, looking for that faint little red glow. That was the last time I ever went on a movie date. It started off like one of those dream weekend plans that actually sound too good to be true. Her name was Maria. We meshed on a Thursday night. Her profile was simple: sunset selfies, a photo on a dock, and a line that said, "I'm better near water." She told me she loved road trips, late night talks, and quiet getaways. The kind of girl who seemed chilled, spontaneous, and fun. We talked for 2 days straight. She said she'd rented a lake house for the weekend and asked if I wanted to join her. She said it was this cozy place outside town, private, peaceful, with its own dock and a fire pit. She even sent pictures, the kind you'd see on Airbnb listings: wood floors, string lights, big windows looking out over the water. It looked amazing. She said she got a great deal because she knew the owner from a previous trip. I didn't think twice. She sounded excited, said she wanted to cook, relax, and disconnect from everything for a few days. I figured, why not? It wasn't far, and she seemed normal. We met up Saturday morning at a gas station off the highway. She was already there when I pulled up, sitting on the hood of her car, wearing sunglasses and smiling like she'd been waiting forever. She had that confident energy people get when they're completely in control. The drive was about 2 hours. She played music the whole way, talking about how much she needed a break from work and city noise. She said she found the place online through an old host she'd stayed with before. I asked which site she used, and she just said, "Not Airbnb anymore, private now." That should have been weird, but I didn't want to ruin the vibe. The house was exactly like the photos. A 2-story wooden cabin with a wraparound porch overlooking the lake. It looked empty, quiet, and kind of perfect. She unlocked the door with a key she said was left under the mat, and I followed her inside. The place was spotless. Furniture neatly arranged, everything smelling faintly like lemon cleaner. There was a welcome mat by the door and towels folded on the couch. It didn't look abandoned. It looked like someone actually lived there part-time. She said the owners used it as a rental property and didn't care who stayed as long as it was booked. She unpacked food, drinks, and candles from her bag like she'd done this before. I helped her bring in a cooler, and then we walked down to the dock. The water was calm. The air was cold enough that you could see your breath, but the view made up for it. We spent the day just hanging around, grilling, taking pictures, playing music. Everything felt normal. That night, after dinner, we sat by the fire pit, wrapped in blankets. She kept saying how nice it was to get away. I started to think it might actually be one of those rare, perfect first weekends you only see in movies. She poured drinks, played soft music from her phone, and laughed like nothing could ruin it. Around 9, we heard a car pull up near the top of the driveway. It was quiet, just the crunch of tires on gravel. At first, we thought it was neighbors or someone lost. Then headlights lit up the side of the house. Maria froze. Her smile dropped instantly. She told me not to move just like that, calm but sharp. She stood up fast and went inside. I followed her, asking what was going on, but she didn't answer. She was pacing, looking out the front window through the blinds. The car door slammed, then another. I could hear voices. 2 men, maybe 3. They weren't shouting, but they sounded serious. Maria turned toward me, whispered that everything was fine, that it was probably the owner checking something. I didn't believe her. She grabbed her phone and started scrolling quickly, muttering about needing to find an email. Before I could ask again, someone knocked hard on the front door. 3 sharp knocks, then louder ones. She didn't answer. The knocks turned into pounding. Then a voice shouted from outside, "Police." They ordered us to open the door immediately. I froze. Maria went pale, like she already knew what's happening. She backed away from the door, whispering that it was a mistake, that she had proved she'd booked the place, but she didn't move to open it. The knocking got louder, the shouting more urgent. Finally, the door swung open, and 2 officers stepped inside with flashlights. They told us to keep our hands visible. I just stood there, completely stunned. One of them asked who we were and how we got in. I told them she'd rented the house. She started talking fast, saying she'd booked it online, that she had an email confirmation. She showed them her phone, but I could see from where I stood, it wasn't an official site. It was a Gmail thread. The officers exchanged a look. One of them called something in over the radio. Within minutes, 2 more cars pulled up. Turns out the house wasn't rental anymore. It used to be listed online years ago, but the owners had stopped renting after moving back in full-time. The family had gone out of town for the weekend, and one of their neighbors called them after seeing unfamiliar cars in the driveway. They thought it was a break-in. Maria had found the old listing photos online and used them to make a fake booking confirmation through a spoofed email that looked like an old rental service. She'd literally just guessed that no one would be there. The key under the mat was real, but it wasn't meant for guests. The police pulled her aside while I stood there trying to explain that I had no idea. She started crying, insisting she didn't mean to break in, that she thought it was still being rented. But the officers said the email address she used to book it was registered under her name, and she'd done the same thing before in other towns. She'd been hopping between empty vacation houses, pretending to rent them through fake sites, staying until she got caught or moved on. They questioned me separately, asked if I was involved. I told them everything. How we met, what she said. How it all seemed normal until that moment. They believed me, but I still had to sit outside on the porch while they searched the house. When they took her out, she didn't say a word. She just kept her head down, hands cuffed, staring at the ground like she was somewhere else completely. They let me leave after taking my statement. I drove home in silence, headlights bouncing off the trees, replaying every conversation we had. The emails, the photos, the way she talked about knowing the owner. It all made sense now. She'd been planning it long before I showed up. The next morning, I checked the news out of curiosity. There it was. Woman arrested for breaking into Lake home using fake rental documents. The picture showed her in handcuffs outside the same house. The article said she'd done it twice before in different states, each time claiming she'd been scammed by a fake listing. I deleted the app that day. Sometimes I think about that night, the sound of the gravel under the police cars, the flicker of the fire going out as the flashlights filled the room. It didn't feel like a getaway anymore. It felt like waking up inside someone else's lie. That was the last time I ever agreed to a weekend trip with someone I just met. He didn't seem like trouble when we matched. His name was Jason. His bio said he was into cars, cooking, and working out. Nothing flashy, just regular. He messaged me first, asking what kind of music I liked. He had that casual charm people use when they're trying to seem normal, and it worked. We talked for a few days, nothing deep. Just the usual surface-level stuff. He mentioned he was busy helping a friend move that weekend, and I joked about how moving was the worst. He said it wasn't bad, just a few boxes and old gear. He even invited me to come hang out after, said the building had a rooftop view of the city, and he'd order food. It sounded casual enough. I figured we'd chill for a bit, maybe grab takeout. Nothing serious. When I got there, the building looked kind of run down from the outside, one of those old apartment blocks where half the windows have curtains and the other half have nothing at all. He met me at the entrance, smiling, wearing a plain hoodie and jeans. He said his friend was already on their way to pick up the last load, so he just needed to sort a few things inside. The hallway smelled like dust and cleaning spray. The elevator was out of order, so we took the stairs up to the third floor. He talked the whole way up, about how his friend was moving to another state, how he was just helping to clear out what was left. I didn't really question it. When we got to the apartment, he unlocked the door, and the first thing that hit me was the smell, like old metal mixed with plastic and something chemical. The lights were dim, just one lamp in the corner. Boxes were stacked everywhere, some sealed, some open, filled with wires and cords. There were TVs leaning against the wall, laptops piled on a table, even a couple of unopened phones still in boxes. He laughed when he saw my face and said his friend used to fix electronics, so most of it was old or broken stock. I nodded, trying to act casual, but there was way too much of it for one person's apartment. He told me to grab a drink from the counter while he finished taping up a box. I walked over to the fridge, but it was empty except for water bottles and energy drinks. There was a bag on the floor, half unzipped, full of what looked like folded envelopes. One of them was open, and inside I saw stacks of cash held together with rubber bands. Not a lot of bills, but enough to make my stomach tighten. I looked at him, and he must have noticed because he said, "That's just payment stuff. Don't worry." I didn't know what that meant, but I didn't ask. The energy in the room had changed, suddenly quiet, heavy. He kept moving boxes, muttering to himself about organizing them by size. I started to notice the labels on the boxes, brand names, serial codes, store tags. It wasn't random junk. It was all new. Everything looked like it had been taken straight from a store shelf. Then I heard it. Sirens. At first faint, echoing from somewhere far off. then louder, getting closer. Jason froze mid-step. He didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then he grabbed his phone and started typing fast, pacing back and forth. The sirens got louder, and I realized they weren't just passing by. They were coming straight toward the building. He turned to me, voice suddenly tense, and told me to stay calm. He said it wasn't about him, that cops were probably just looking for someone else. He shoved a box under the table, then another one, then looked around like he was trying to figure out what to hide next. The sirens stopped right outside. He looked at me like he was about to say something, but then came the sound of heavy boots running up the stairs. Loud voices shouting commands, the kind of shouting that makes your stomach drop instantly. He went pale. Before I could move, there was banging on the door. Someone yelled for him to open it. He didn't. He backed up, eyes darting around like a cornered animal. I started shaking, saying we needed to open it before they broke it down. He whispered, "Don't say anything. You were never here." Then the door burst open. Police fled the room, guns drawn, yelling for him to get down. He dropped immediately, hands up, shouting that he didn't do anything. I just froze near the counter, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. One of the officers told me to back away and keep my hands visible. They cuffed him right there, reading him his rights while the others started tearing through the boxes. One of them pulled open a sealed crate and started unloading brand new electronics, tablets, phones, watches, all still in original packaging. Another found a bag full of cash stuffed under the couch. It didn't take long for them to figure out what was going on. The whole place was filled with stolen goods, stuff taken from warehouses, delivery trucks, and stores. Jason wasn't helping a friend move anything. He'd been storing stolen merchandise for a group that was being tracked for weeks. They found tracking devices hidden in some of the boxes. Turns out, the police had been following a shipment stolen 2 days earlier, and it led straight to this building. They questioned me for nearly an hour. I told them everything. How I met him, how he said it was just a moving job, how I had no idea what was in the boxes. They asked if I'd touched anything or seen any money. I said no, though I knew they'd probably seen me staring at that bag earlier. When they finally let me go, I walked down the stairwell in a daze. The hallway was full of flashing lights and echoing radio chatter. Jason was still upstairs, shouting that it wasn't his, that he was set up. They didn't even respond. Outside, the air felt cold and sharp. I stood there watching as they carried boxes out one by one, stacking them near the police vans. The quiet street had turned into a full crime scene. Yellow tape going up while neighbors peeked from their doors. I got in my car and sat there for a long time, trying to calm down. I checked my phone and saw his last message from earlier that day. "You're gonna like this place. It's chill." A few days later, the story hit the local news. Police bust stolen electronics operation in residential building. The report said a 29-year-old man was arrested after being caught storing and distributing stolen goods worth over $150,000. They mentioned accomplices still at large, but didn't name him directly. The photo blurred his face, but I knew it was him. I deleted the app right after that. Every time I hear sirens now, my stomach twists the same way it did that night. I still think about the look on his face when the door flew open. It wasn't fear. It was like he already knew it was coming. That was the last time I ever agreed to help someone move stuff. She seemed like she actually had hobbies, which was rare. Her name was Riley, and her profile wasn't full of mirror selfies or random quotes. It was cars. Photos at races, engine bays, her leaning on hoods smiling with grease on her hands. Her bio said, "If you don't like cars, you'll be bored." She wasn't wrong. We started talking after I commented on one of her photos of an old Nissan. She told me she loved project cars and that she helped her friends with meets and weekend shows. She had that mix of confidence and friendliness that made you want to keep talking. She invited me to one of the events she said she was helping run. It was supposed to be a private car meet, and she said it'd be more fun than sitting in a bar. I'd never been to a proper car meet before, so it sounded like a good time. She said to meet her at a gas station just outside the city. I figured it'd be a handful of cars showing off, and people just hanging out. Nothing crazy. When I got there, she was already leaning against her silver Civic, hair tied back, hoodie up, music playing from her car. She grinned when I pulled in and said we'd be heading out soon. There were already about 10 other cars parked around, people laughing, smoking, revving engines. Everyone seemed to know each other, and it had this weird mix of excitement and tension, like they were waiting for something to start. We waited about 15 minutes before a black Supra pulled up loud enough to turn heads. The guy driving it waved at her. She waved back, but didn't look thrilled. She muttered something about him being an old friend, then told me to follow her car when everyone started leaving. The convoy of cars pulled out of the gas station like a scene from a movie. I followed behind her Civic as we took a few back roads, then a long stretch of highway before turning off down a dark industrial road lined with warehouses. You could hear engines echoing in the distance before we even got there. When we arrived, there were already dozens of cars parked in rows under flickering streetlights. People stood in groups with hoodies pulled tight, talking over music blasting from someone's trunk. It was louder, bigger, and way more chaotic than I expected. Riley looked at me like she was proud of the turnout. She told me this was the fun version of a car show. No corporate stuff, no sponsors, just real people who love cars. It looked organized in a messy way. People filming, taking photos, laughing, drinking energy drinks. A few girls were walking around with cameras, and someone was collecting money near a parked van. Then two cars lined up at the end of the road. People started shouting, forming a crowd. Engines revved so loud it shook the ground. The smell of fuel hit hard, and before I could process it, the cars launched forward, tires screeching, everyone cheering like it was normal. That's when it clicked. It wasn't a show. It was a drag meet. I tried to play it cool. Riley was hyped, recording on her phone, cheering for one of the drivers. She looked like she belonged there completely. I asked her if this was legal, and she just smirked and said not really, but it was controlled. That word didn't make me feel better. After a few runs, she said she wanted to introduce me to the guy running the event. We walked over to the van where people were handing cash to a tall guy in a dark jacket. When she tapped his shoulder, he turned around, and she froze for half a second before forcing a smile. He was her ex. I could tell instantly. The way they looked at each other said everything. She said his name under her breath, and he laughed like he already knew what I was thinking. He reached out to shake my hand, and I did, but he didn't let go right away. He kept smiling, like he was testing something. The air between them was weird. She tried to move the conversation along, asking about the setup and if everything was cleared. He nodded but kept glancing past her, scanning the crowd. I could feel my stomach tightening. Something about him didn't match the energy of everyone else. He wasn't excited, just restless. More cars started lining up. A few guys were arguing near the start line about money. It got louder, more chaotic. Riley said they had issues before with people not paying up, that her ex handled it. Then I heard sirens. At first distant, like background noise, then closer, fast. Riley turned her head sharply, eyes wide. Her ex grabbed the cash box and started shouting orders, telling people to move. Within seconds, it was chaos. Engines revved, tires spun, people running in every direction. Some tried to block the exits, others just bolted. She grabbed my arm and told me to follow her to her car. I did, heart pounding. The sirens got louder until you could see flashing red and blue reflecting off the car windows. People were shouting, trying to grab their stuff, some abandoning cars completely. We ran to her Civic, but a group of police cars had already pulled up at the entrance. Officers were shouting through megaphones, blocking the main road. Everyone started cutting through a side alley. Riley cursed under her breath, threw her bag in the car, and told me to get in. We barely made it 10 feet before another set of lights appeared at the far end of the lot. More cops. She slammed the brakes, killed the headlights, and told me to stay down. I could hear doors slamming, people being yelled at. Radio was going off. The whole place was surrounded. From where we hid behind a dumpster, I could see her ex sprinting across the lot with the cash box still in hand. A cop shouted after him. He didn't stop. A second later, someone tackled him to the ground. They dragged him out, cuffed him, and started clearing everyone else out. Some people tried to claim it was a charity event. Others said it was just a meet. The cops didn't buy any of it. They started searching cars, taking names, recording license plates. Riley stayed completely quiet, staring at her ex being pushed into the back of a cruiser. When they called her name, she whispered that she needed to go talk to them. I told her to wait, but she was already walking out into the open with her hands raised. They questioned her for nearly 20 minutes while I sat in the car waiting, pretending not to panic. Eventually, one of the officers came over to ask for my ID. I explained how I'd just come with her. I didn't know it was illegal. He looked tired and said I wasn't in trouble, but they might call me for a statement later. By the time it was over, most of the crowd was gone. Tow trucks were pulling cars away, lights flashing across the lot. Riley got back in the car, face blank. She didn't say much on the drive home, just that her ex had been running the meets for months, making thousands in side bets and selling parts. She said she didn't think he'd show up that night, that she hadn't seen him in a year. I didn't ask anything else. When I got home, I read the local news. Police break up illegal street racing event in industrial zone. The article mentioned multiple arrests, including the event's organizer, wanted for outstanding warrants. They also listed several known associates, one of which matched Riley's name. I never heard from her again. Her profile disappeared by the next day. Sometimes late at night, when I hear engines on empty roads, I think about that night. The sound of tires burning, the flashing lights, and the look on her face when she saw him. That was the last time I ever went anywhere that started with, "It's just a small meet." It was one of those matches that happen out of nowhere. His name was Luke, and he seemed normal enough. Pictures at the gym, one hiking photo, a few casual selfies. His bio just said, "Night owl, always down for food and good company." It didn't sound weird, just kind of simple. He messaged me that night asking if I wanted to grab something to eat since I'd posted about being bored. He said he knew a diner that stayed open late, one of those old ones near the highway with neon lights that flicker and chrome boots that haven't changed in years. He said it was quiet, perfect for late night talks. I didn't see a reason to say no. He picked me up in a silver sedan. It looked clean, smelled like air freshener and something faintly chemical. He was polite, maybe too polite, talking in short sentences like he rehearsed them. He asked me questions about my job and where I grew up, but never said much about himself. When I asked where he was from, he just said around. I didn't push it. We drove for about 20 minutes, past closed shops and empty streets. The diner sat at the edge of an industrial area, glowing red and blue from the neon sign that read, "Eat here all night." A few trucks were parked in the lot, and inside I could see two older guys at the counter and a waitress wiping down tables. It looked harmless. Inside, it smelled like grease and coffee. The waitress led us to a booth by the window. Luke sat across from me, hands clasped, staring out the window more than he looked at me. I tried to keep the conversation going, but he gave short answers. He wasn't rude, just detached, like his head was somewhere else. He ordered pancakes and bacon. I ordered fries and a milkshake. The waitress smiled and said she'd be right back. As we waited, I noticed something off. Every few minutes, he would glance over my shoulder toward the front door. His posture never relaxed. He kept adjusting his phone face down on the table, tapping the edge like he was timing something. When I asked if he was okay, he said he was just tired. Then he smiled, and it felt forced. The waitress brought our food. He thanked her and started eating like he hadn't had a meal in days, fast, robotic, eyes darting between bites. I laughed a little, tried to lighten the mood, and told him to slow down or he'd choke. He didn't even react. Halfway through, his phone buzzed. He froze mid-bite, glanced at it, and then slid it into his jacket. I noticed the name on the screen before it disappeared. Sam T. He looked tense after that. I thought maybe it was a friend or something, but his energy shifted completely. He started asking me random questions, what kind of car I drove, if I lived alone, if I ever went out late by myself. His tone wasn't flirty anymore. It was curious in a weird way, like he was taking mental notes. Before I could answer one of them, I noticed movement outside. A police cruiser pulled up near the parking lot entrance with its lights off. Then another one. Luke didn't see it yet. He was busy pushing his plate away, looking restless. The diner door opened, and 3 officers walked in, not rushing, but not casual either. The waitress froze behind the counter. The older men at the bar turned in their stools. Luke finally looked up, and everything about him changed. His face went white, his hand clenched around his phone, and he mumbled something I couldn't hear. One of the officers pointed toward our booth and called out his name, clear, loud, and commanding. Luke didn't move at first. Then he tried to stand. Before he could, 2 more cops entered from the side door. They were everywhere, closing in fast. The waitress backed away as they told him to put his hands where they could see them. I just sat there frozen, fries still in my hand, trying to understand what was happening. He didn't fight. He just lifted his hands slowly and said something to one of them that made no sense. They pulled him out of the booth, pressed him against the wall, and cuffed him right there. His phone fell out of his pocket and slid across the floor. Everyone in the diner was silent except for the sound of the radio chatter coming from one of the officers. I caught a few words. Suspect confirmed. Same vehicle. Tinder operation. That's when it hit me. They've been tracking him. The waitress whispered something to one of the cops and pointed at me. He came over, calm but serious, and asked if I'd come with him outside for a few questions. I followed him out, shaking. They had Luke leaning against his car while another officer searched it. The trunk was open. Inside were a few bags, some notebooks, and what looked like fake IDs spread out across the seat. The officer told me I wasn't in trouble. He asked how long I had known him. I told him just a few days. He nodded like he'd heard that answer before. Apparently, Luke, or whatever his real name was, had been part of a string of Tinder setups happening across nearby towns. He'd meet women on the app, invite them to safe public spots like that same diner, and wait until they got comfortable enough to leave with him. The police had been running a sting for weeks after a few reports came in about people who'd gone missing after meeting someone matching the description. He wasn't just some random guy. He was baiting people. The only reason they caught him that night was because they tracked his license plate after he showed up at the same diner again, the same booth, the same time. They had been sitting outside waiting for him to make a move. When I looked at him one last time before they took him away, he wasn't angry or scared. He was blank, like getting caught was part of the plan. The cops took my statement inside, then asked if I wanted someone to drive me home. I said I'd call a ride instead. The waitress gave me a free coffee while I waited, her hands shaking as she poured it. She said she'd seen him there twice before with other girls. She thought he was just a regular. I sat there staring out the window at the flashing lights bouncing off the diner sign. It didn't feel real. The same neon that looked harmless an hour ago now looked harsh and ugly. When the police cars finally left, the parking lot felt too quiet. I ordered another coffee just to have an excuse to stay a little longer. I deleted Tinder in the Uber on the way home. I found out later that week he'd been using stolen photos and rotating between fake names, meeting different people at the same diner each time. The police found a notebook in his car with notes about people, names, times, dates, descriptions. Mine was one of them. I still think about that night whenever I drive by a diner with bright lights and empty parking lots. I don't go inside anymore, I just keep driving. That was the last time I ever agreed to a late-night meal with someone from an app.